Yo, what's up, man? How's it going, Chris?
Yo, good morning. Good morning. How's everyone feeling? Super excited about today's show. Always a good time to catch up with the Facet guys. What's going on, Adam? How we feeling?
Feeling pretty good. I have no idea really what's happening in the Facet ecosystem. So, Tom, if you want to tell us, man, what's good with Facet, bro?
Hello. Thank you for having us. Thank you to everyone listening. It's true. I've been in a cave, but I'm out. I'm coming out. It feels good actually to be out of a cave. I wasn't expecting this. What is Facet about? So a lot is changing with Facet. A lot has changed, but one thing is the same, which is kind of corny, really. What is the goal of Facet? Still the same, which is to save the soul of Ethereum from getting acid poured on its. Because I think we can all feel like things don't feel so great with Ethereum, and they've been getting worse. And the reason for that is that giant organizations, giant corporations, led by small groups of people, are taking over the future of Ethereum by funneling all users to centralized L2s. And Facet is trying to fix that by creating a completely decentralized blockchain. A completely decentralized scaling solution for Ethereum where everyone's equal. There's no place for the CEO of Coinbase to have a little more power or whatever he has on Base, or a lot more power. And it's going to be a blockchain where it's going to be a scaling solution where you can do everything you can do on Base or any other centralized L2. And this has been our goal for a while. We've been working on it constantly, and we are nearing the completion of the V2. Which is going to really, really propel this into the future. And we're really excited to talk about it.
All right. So before we get into that, let's talk just for a minute on this, because this has been a topic of conversation now for, God, probably a month. People are wondering, and I've come to kind of a new framing for myself, because obviously I have big ETH bags, right? Big believer in ETH. But we've come to this point where, okay, we've had the first real, I would say, Polygon kind of kicked it off, but really we've had some real money put behind some, L2 solutions. And we were kind of promised this, okay, well, the fees are going to funnel down to L1. And certainly that hasn't happened. It's been obviously quite the opposite, right? And I'll just give you my current view. But you can absolutely tell me I'm wrong, and I may be wrong. My current view is that what ETH is in, and this is probably what, the ETH maxis would tell you, is that we're actually in an L2 basically accumulation phase. So we want to attract all the L2s on Earth, every, Wall Street firm and bank and every business on Earth who wants to use blockchain. We want to attract them, and we're going to get them in with this basically free service, right? So you can, foundationally have the security of ETH, but it's going to be it's near free, right? And so we get all these guys on board. And then once the world's on top of Ethereum, then we can kind of jiggle the fees up a little bit. And this will provide kind of the underlying value to the actual ETH token, right? That's my current view. It could be wrong, but tell me how that's a flawed logic. Tell me how that actually is not right. Or is it right?
Sure. I like that. To be honest, I don't really hold any ETH. I don't really hold any cryptocurrencies. I have some NFTs. I am, I really like the technology I really like this idea of the original thing Ethereum was, which is this world computer idea, right? Where you can go and you can use this computer platform. It has money built in, it has communication built, it has art, it has all this stuff built into it, and no one can stop you. And anyone in the world can use it. The world computer. This was an amazing thing, right? Because if you use other types of computers like Amazon AWS, Google Cloud, like this is corny stuff. I say this all the time. It's like very idealistic, but like you can get shut down. Like if you go up against Google, it happened to me, you're going to get shut down. And so this to me was the really appealing idea for like the future of humanity. And I think the currency that powers this is going to do well, but how that happens is tricky because the original version of this couldn't work. It couldn't work. It was too expensive and blah, blah, blah. This is why we need, scaling solutions. And so when you look at this from a tech standpoint, what you really see is there are a lot of details and the economics are maybe confusing, but from a tech standpoint, the original architecture of Ethereum doesn't make sense, basically. It is not a way to do computations. It's not a good way to do anything, really. It's not set up in a way to be scalable. And so that's why these other solutions had to come into play. So the first thing is just without scaling solutions, without L2s, without rollups, we'd be dead. So do you want a chance? What these scaling solutions give you is a chance at life. And with Facet V2, we really sat down and said, okay, Facet V1, we rejected everything. We started from scratch and built our own thing, and that was really hard and annoying. Facet V2, we actually did some research, and it turns out when you start researching these technologies, they're actually pretty good. You know, you look at optimistic rollups, you look at all these things, they're actually pretty good. They just get used in weird and not good ways. So I'm a believer in L2s. I'm a believer in rollups. It just has to be a good L2. It has to be a good rollup, and I think this is going to allow the world to use Ethereum and benefit from this. But the problem is you go from world computer to a platform where companies can launch their own computers, and those computers are not world computers. If you look at Base, I'm going to pick on Base because I like Base, and they're the most successful one.
We can pick on Base.
Yeah, I like them, by the way. I like Coinbase. I use Coinbase when I'm selling my crypto, which I always do when I get it. No, I like crypto. But if you look at Base, Base isn't a world computer because there's a small group of people that control it, right? If you're the CEO of Coinbase, how do you feel when you use Base? Probably pretty good. How do I feel when I use Base? Well, not as good as when I use Ethereum or when I'm in the Coinbase CEO. If I'm the Coinbase CEO, which maybe I'll be someday, then I'd feel better. So the problem is using the world computer as a platform to create computers that are run by small groups of people where there's not equality. And that, I think, will lead to total disaster for the world, for the ETH currency, for everything, because you can't just look at that and say, hey, Base is doing well now. It's like, what happens when the government steps in? What happens when Coinbase goes bankrupt? It can, who knows? So
Sure.
That's the big risk, I think, because that's game over.
So your idea or your kind of vision when we're looking at what you want Facet to become is to stay true to the ethos of, well, crypto, really, right? While I guess the whole idea of with these L2s was that, yeah, it can be completely centralized. Actually, we're going to encourage people to run centralized, computers on top of Ethereum, because that still brings value to Ethereum, right? I mean, I guess that's the strategy. But what you're saying is what Facet allows them to do is still run their own thing, but run it on base layer Ethereum, basically.
Right. And so first of all, I'm not anti-centralized rollups. I'm not anti-base. I'm not centralized anything. I'm against everything being centralized. And if you go to L2 Beat or open your eyes for 1 second, what you would see is today, every single one is centralized. Everyone, without exception. And that's really bad and crazy to me. And so what do I mean by centralized? Like, centralized is like this big word. Like, what does that even mean? To me, I would frame it more as equality. It's like, okay, if you are using a computer system, a protocol, crypto protocol, is there equality or not? Are some users given benefits that others aren't? Like Ethereum, Vitalik has no benefits you have. He doesn't get extra money. He can't take your money. Like, why would he set that up? Like, why wouldn't he want power? Well, because there are really good reasons for the security, the evolutionist thing, not to have power. On these other L2s, there are small groups of people that have more power, and that is messed up. It's not messed up for a couple things to have that, but it's messed up for the entire ecosystem to be based on things where there's no equality, where you are not the number one person. There's someone else above you, probably multiple people.
Yeah, I get it. I get it completely. So let's dive into some of the details here a little bit. What's going to be, or what is the difference that you guys are working on between V1? Well, give us a brief idea of what V1 was, and then the difference that you're building with V2. What are the changes?
Sure. So V1 and V2 are both rollups. We didn't call V1 a rollup because we didn't know what a rollup was back when we launched it. We thought rollups were all bad and we hated them, but it turns out we are a rollup. And what a rollup means is, instead of using Ethereum L1 normal smart contracts for execution, you just put the data required to do execution on Ethereum, and then you have another computer system do the execution. And so all state and execution is handled by something else, but all transaction data and ordering is handled by Ethereum. And this is the crucial insight of rollups that all rollups use. And the insight basically gets you free money because it gets you the security of Ethereum, because Ethereum tells you what the ordering is going to be. And it gets you the execution you want, knowing that execution is determined, or let me put it this way, the result of all computations is determined by the order of the transactions on Ethereum. The execution merely reveals these results to other people. So if you're using Base, for example, the outcome of everything that you do is set as soon as Base posts a blob. The reveal of that comes from using roll-up software. So anyway, taking a step back, these are roll-ups. These are cheaper ways of using Ethereum, but they both had very, very big differences, major differences. And the big difference is no bridges, no smart contracts. And this is where roll-ups all get in trouble today, because roll-ups today depend on smart contracts on the layer 1 on Ethereum, and in particular depend on them for bridging Ether, the gas token, the native token. And when you depend on a layer 1 smart contract, you are going to depend on the people who control that contract. And therefore, on a thing like Base, the controllers of the bridges on Base, which are multi-sig contracts, multi-sig wallets, they control it. And so what we set out to do, we said, none of that stuff. No contracts on the L1, no special permissions, nothing. And V1 did this in a very unique way, which we thought made us special, but was bad. And so if you're trying to read the docs of V1, it's interesting historically, but don't launch a protocol that's unique, basically. No one wants to use a unique thing. People want you to take a familiar thing and change just enough to make it do the special thing you want. And that's what we're doing with V2. We're making it exactly like Base, except decentralized. And that's the big, big change. You're going to do everything you want. You're going to copy paste your contracts that you have running on Base. You run them on Facet V2. You can do all this kind of stuff. Whereas V1, it was like, okay, what do I have to do with this thing? I have to learn a new language, blah, blah, blah. So that's the big change.
Okay. So your strategy with V1 was you guys were going to have your own language, your own kind of smart contract language, and do it that way. But now you've decided to pivot and go to, I guess, native languaging. So for smart, so you can literally copy paste smart contracts and all that sort of stuff. Is that basically, am I understanding it right?
Exactly. We're moving to the EVM. We're moving to Solidity.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is just based on, in the beginning, we thought we have to throw all of this out. This is all garbage. We have to start from scratch on the future of Ethereum. But when you do some research, you actually learn there's some smart people out there and there's some good ideas. So this was like a humility kind of thing too. Like we learned that we don't know absolutely everything, and it was kind of fun.
So tell me, how is it? So I'm in some Ethscription chats and stuff like that, and they were like, I'm hearing kind of maybe some negativity from the Ethscription crowd. Is it still using Ethscriptions as like a foundation for it, or what's happening with that?
So that's a great question. Obviously, Michael and I co-founded Ethscriptions. We did a ton of development on it. There's an open source indexer we put out that anyone can use without being attached to us personally. Like, it's a decentralized protocol, and it was really the first version of this idea of scaling without smart contracts, scaling in a decentralized way. But with Ethscriptions, we ran into this problem of just, there's some limitations. It's good for some use cases. It's less good for others. So we wanted to launch Facet. V1 of Facet did use Ethscriptions as the transfer mechanism for transactions. And that was very cool, but it also had some real downsides. And some of the downsides were technical, like the fact that Ethscriptions is really a text-based format. It's UTF-8. And when you are doing Ethereum transactions, you are trying to do binary data transfer. And so that is a problem. And some other stuff like that. But the biggest issue is just it is less understood by the broader community. And so we had to kind of make this choice and say, all right, are we trying to really drive this to absolute mass adoption? Well, we need to pick a technology, again, not our own private technology that we think is great. We need to pick a technology that's going to meet people where they are, that's going to let people choose it and use it. So we had to think, do we love Ethscriptions so much we're going to shoehorn Ethscriptions in to a use case it's not optimized for? We said no, but Ethscriptions are still a huge part of our spiritual reality, of our daily use of Ethereum, and a big part of Facet too. Like we have Inscriptions bridges that allow you to bridge in your inscriptions assets, your inscriptions tokens, and trade them on Facet. This is definitely a feature that Base doesn't have, so we're definitely adding something there because I think it's important. And we hope to support other bridges in the future for bridging not just tokens. So the goal is to be additive. In other words, if you love inscriptions the way they are, then no one can touch them. It's decentralized. But if you want to do more stuff that can't be done in that protocol, you can bridge them to Facet and do interesting things and then come back out. So we love inscriptions, but they weren't the right choice for the transaction envelope for Facet transactions.
So tell us what's the actual that envelope now? What'd you guys move to?
It looks very much like an Ethereum transaction. So when you create an Ethereum transaction in MetaMask bundles that up as a ball of binary data and sends that to an Ethereum node, and they use an encoding mechanism called reverse length prefix, which RLP for fellow nerds. It's just like a specific way of encoding binary information. And so we are copying that and making a Facet transaction look as much as possible like an Ethereum transaction when you create it from a software standpoint. But it's still very weird because it's still going in Ethereum call data. It's still very much like an inscription in that way. So it's still very weird, but it's generating it. You can use existing tools. If you have Veeam, a JavaScript tool for doing Ethereum stuff, you can use existing tools to do that. You don't have to learn a new thing, which was the goal. So
basically, it works in the same way that you're still sending Ethereum transactions. So that becomes the kind of, I don't know what you call it, a data layer. And then it's interpreted by what you guys are building, but basically like an an open source kind of indexer to read all of this. How does that kind of all fit together?
Yep, that's exactly right. So again, the idea is equality, right? So everything's equal all the time. So one thing that's typically not equal in rollups and L2s is you have this sequencer thing, right? Centralized sequencers are bad, right? Now, the way that works is you have to take your transaction, you give it to a third party, say the CEO of Coinbase, for example, and that third party can decide, do I want to, put this on Ethereum so that it can be part of the rollup state in history, or do I want to censor it, throw it away? So this is a big issue, and we didn't want that. And so you sequence your own transactions on Ethereum, and that means you send them directly to the Facet inbox address, the same inbox address, and they go on Ethereum. So you're guaranteed inclusion on Facet when you send that 100% of the time. Now, the way we...
Wait, what do you mean by Facet inbox? What does that mean?
That's just the address. Sorry, good question. That's the address where it's like 0x, all zeros, and at the end, face 7, which kind of looks like Facet. And that's just the a random burn address basically on Ethereum that we know to look at to distinguish when someone is trying to send one of these things. So
rather than sending a Facet transaction to myself to create a new Facet, or a new inscription, this I'm sending to basically a burner address that you've created. That becomes the place where the indexer looks for these transactions, basically.
Correct. Okay. And the way that works, and just to be very clear, like I've been, it was a lot easier to hate rollups before I understood them, because after that, we are very much taking, it's very much modeled on optimism. Like optimism is actually very good. It just has some bad qualities that like bring down existing implementations. But this other process is actually very good. And the way it works is you look at Ethereum, you read in the transactions, in our case is the one sent to the Facet inbox address, and then you take those transactions, you change a couple things to make the data look good, you package it up and you take it, and now it's an Ethereum transaction, you translate it into a normal Ethereum transaction, and then you take an Ethereum node, right, which is the a Go Ethereum node software, and you feed it that Ethereum transaction. And so basically, this is cool because it allows you to run the exact version of Ethereum that is normally run, except the Ethereum node thinks that you are a consensus, that the consensus mechanism of Ethereum is giving it that transaction. So it's like you are pretending to be like the proof of stake mechanism and feeding it. So it's like the point being basically you are using the exact same software, the exact same functionality that regular Ethereum uses. It's just the source of the data is different, but because the source of the data is available to anyone. Anyone can run a Facet node, and you will always reconstruct the exact same state that anyone else has because you are using the same, infrastructure. So that's how it works. And so anyone can look at this. And then, there's also a further step, which is this question of, what about bridges? And this is the thing that's really different from Optimism. In Optimism, there's one bridge, basically. It's run by the CEO of Coinbase. In our case, anyone can make a bridge, right? And so we have the same mechanism by which someone can read the outputs of this Facet node process, of this Facet ETH process, and use those outputs to inform layer one contracts about the state of Facet and thereby build bridges, but it's not part of the protocol. It's not baked in. Anyone can do it. But aside from these factors, it's very, very similar to Optimism. And we hope this is helpful because, if you're interested in rollups, you won't have to learn a whole new thing. You can just come and see our thing, which is just a little bit different in some important ways.
All right. So tell me why nobody's built this already. I mean, we saw it kind of this idea of like, I'm almost looking at it, because like you didn't know about rollups. I don't really know about them, but I do understand this idea of like meta protocols on top of stuff. Which I'm kind of, my head's kind of wrapping myself around it in that way, right? Where these transactions take place and then the computation and everything is done by an indexer that's off chain. Makes sense. But when I'm looking at that, I'm like, well, wait a minute, with all we've had going on, I mean, is it just because, you guys were around and you guys did the inscriptions that you were in a position to like think of this and do this? Or why was this not when Vitalik and all those guys are thinking about L2s? Why wasn't this a strategy that they thought about back then?
Right. So I think it's a good question. To us, it seems like obvious. I think one answer is that it is really nice to build things where you have all the power, basically. And if there's no social stigma there, if Vitalik is cheering you on, why not just go with the crowd? Because you have to make money, and it's probably going to be harder for us to make money. Or like if you have total control, it's easy to make money. But there is one very legitimate downside to our approach, depending on how you look at it. And that approach comes when you think about the native currency, right? The native currency, that's when you use Ether on Ethereum. You buy something. If you're programming a smart contract, you do MSG.value. It's how you pay gas is the most important aspect here. So how does the native currency work? Well, if you look at something like Base, the native currency is Ether. Mm-hmm. And the way it works is you deposit Ether on the L1 on a contract-based control. So you get Ether on the L2. And so you're allowed to use Ether as native currency. It feels like the L1. Now, obviously, you don't actually get Ether on the L2. Right. You get another thing that should have another symbol, but doesn't because of the whole cultural milieu we're in right now, because Ether can't be taken from you by the Coinbase CEO, whereas, and it's probably him plus a multi-sig, so 10 people or 20 people even say, whereas Base Ether can be taken from you if 20 people want to do it. So obviously it's not actually Ether, but it feels like Ether when things are going well, and crucially, it depends on permission, smart contracts, and owners and non-equality. So for Facet, the question is, how do we do a native token? How do we do gas on Facet, basically? Because you can have Ether on Facet, you got a bridged Ether, whatever you want to do, but you can't do that to use that to pay the native token. So we are creating a new mechanism for it's kind of interesting, for creating a for a native token on Facet. And that mechanism is very similar. Actually, I saw a tweet from you guys. It's very similar to the XCP thing. I think it is the proof of burn notion. So basically the way it works is when you create Facet transactions, some Ether is burned. And the reason is because you're creating Ethereum transactions in the process, right? So you have to spend Ether to do that, burn some Ether, burn gas. And when you do that, you are minted on the other side automatically some Facet compute token, which is the name of the native currency on Facet. And this is a very strict rule, right? It's rule of the protocol. No one has power over this. We can't control. We don't get any allocation. There's no pre-mine. There's none of this stuff. It's all equal, exactly equal. But this mechanism is how you get a native token and how you pay gas. And so if you prefer to have Ether as your native token, although it's not really Ether, then you are going to consider this a downside, basically. But if you want to have a secure native token that has this equality component, then you might like Facet Compute Token.
Why do you even need Facet Compute Token? Why can't it just, since the transaction is being paid for on Ethereum, and I'm sure these transactions are pretty inexpensive, right? When you're just sending it to the burn address, I'm sure it's relatively inexpensive. But why do you even need, because the computation's all happening kind of off chain anyway, why do you even need this, Facet Compute Token?
Right. So that's a good question. And indeed, in V1, we did the thing that you're talking about now. You didn't need it. And there was no gas on Facet, and you just did whatever you wanted. And the reason we were able to do that is because contracts had to be on an allow list to get deployed. This was like the downside of Facet V1 that you're trying to fix and that we have fixed. But when anyone can deploy a contract, anyone can create an infinite loop in it that will make it impossible to execute, or a very large finite loop, or basically you can get DOS if you don't have gas and you let people do anything they want. Now, the gas for us, like, this isn't a token that we expect, like, you can get it and do whatever, but really it's an anti-DOS mechanism, meaning that a normal person using Facet will never have to think about this.
Gotcha.
Because the amount of gas they spend on Ethereum will be more than enough by a lot to cover the FCT mint for what they want to do. This is for if people are trying to do really big things or trying to DOS us, this is what's going to stop them. But for an average user, you'll never have to think about this if you don't want to.
So, I mean, the reality is, but then if the DOS, they still have to create the contract on Ethereum, right? So in theory, they'd still be paying a gas fee on Ethereum, right? Is there another, like, so I want to create it. Let's just say I create a contract, right? On Facet, but I send it as an Ethereum transaction, or the fees on Ethereum. I then receive this burn token on the other, or this token on the other side, the Facet Compute Token on the other side. But I don't understand how that prevents me from a DOS attack, when the reality is I'm still have to pay the Ethereum kind of fee. How does it?
Yeah, so it's just the magnitude here. So, like, Ethereum has a block gas limit of 30 million gas. And Facet, we're still tuning it, but like, say it's going to be 300 million. It's going to be a lot bigger because we're scaling Ethereum, 300 million. And so we don't want someone to be able to use all 300 million gas units in a Facet block without some real consequence to them. And it's really easy to, with a very small contract that'd be very cheap to deploy, to write a loop that will expend any number. And so that's got to it's got to stop. It's got to cost you, unless you have enough money to cover it, in which case you can use the whole gas limit of the block, just like on Ethereum. So it's really for extreme cases. And yeah, that's how it's going to manifest to an average user. It's going to be the same user experience as V1, which is no gas, unless you're trying to do something,
malicious, basically.
Malicious, yeah.
And so that
not always. I mean, not always malicious, but sometimes also just like, that requires a lot of compute, like maybe deploying like
can you not hear? You can't hear Michael?
Oh goodness. I can only hear you.
Okay.
I only have ears from you.
All right, I'm gonna drop you down. Why don't you close out and then come back in? Because yeah.
Okay.
It might be me.
Well, we hear you. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, like, the average user transaction is not going to have to worry about it, but it's just it's not necessarily just whether transaction is like malicious or not, but just how much gas are you wanting to use on Facet. So it might not be trying to do something malicious, but you want to do something that's going to be using a lot of gas, in which case you might need to accumulate some FCT for your Facet transaction to go through on the other side.
So from a user perspective, tell me how this is going to look from a kind of a UI UX. Like, am I interfacing with Facet, or am I interfacing with Ethereum? How's it going to look and feel for the user?
Yeah, so directly you're going to be interfacing with Ethereum, like from a writing perspective, like you're sending transactions to Ethereum, but it's gonna feel like you're just it's just only interfacing with Facet. Like there's like an RPC for Facet to like, read transactions and state and all the RPC calls, except you won't be sending your transactions to that RPC. You will send them to the Ethereum RPC. So for the most part, it's like you're on a different chain. I mean, because you are. Basically, like Tom was saying, it's basically just like Optimism, except you're your own batcher. Like Optimism, like with Optimism and Base or any optimistic rollup, there are like these different layers with how it all works. And the first part is the sequencer. So the sequencer is creating blocks faster than the L1 block time, right? And so there's this state of the world that exists that if it all shut down, no one would know about it because it exists in a loop that's like, running faster than the L1, right? But eventually, the sequencer is like creating these blocks and creating, filling these blocks with transactions. And then the batcher is running and it's posting those to the L1. And as soon as it posts it to the L1, then basically at that point, it works just like Facet, where if you were to like spin up an Optimism node or a Base node and it was to like try to sync, the way it syncs is by reading those batches that were posted to the L1. So it's very similar to how that works, except you pull out the sequencer part. The batcher is not privileged. Anyone can post transactions to the L1, and whenever you sync, it syncs just the exact same way, where it's pulling those transactions from the L1 and it's building state from that.
Gotcha. One question I have, just because, obviously we're very, we follow Counterparty a lot, and they just did a major rebuild. And I just know that one of the main issues was like, you couldn't have a computer fast enough to basically fully like index the chain. It was so heavy, and just really difficult for anybody to sync it all properly. How are you guys approaching that? And what's the kind of goal for, number of people who are running this, or is it just going to be a handful of like larger organizations, or you want this me to be able to run one on my home computer? How are you guys looking at that?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, that's part of, just tuning the gas limit, the block gas limits, and also just, tuning how much, gas is needed to create Facet transactions, all these different things. Like, so the throughput isn't like insanely high or something, but, I think that basically the end goal is to make it where, most people can run it. Obviously, you're going to need some sort of machine requirements. Yep. But the idea is that, anyone who's building applications on it can run their Facet nodes. They don't need to depend on anyone specifically, but it's an open market. So if you lose trust for not operating correctly, then you're going to lose trust. And so people are going to, use the one, whatever RPCs that they trust the most, similar to how, it works with Ethereum. Like everyone's just using RPCs and they're trusting that they're reporting data correctly.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, just real quick, the crucial thing to think about here when it comes to rollups, this is the crucial unlock, crucial power of the rollup. Because in the case of the L1, you need a lot of people to run this stuff because you need them to secure Ethereum. You need them to make sure it all works. Whereas when it comes to the rollup, you are needing people to reveal the truth, to explain to people what's going on, not to secure it. So it's like, as Michael says, when it comes to something like Etherscan, how many people have to be able to run Etherscan? Like, more people obviously should be able to, but Etherscan can't like change the reality. And even if Etherscan lies to you, when you actually find out the truth, if you did a transaction on the basis of their lie, that transaction would revert, because they'd say, oh, the price of this token is this, and you'd try to sell it, and the slippage would hit. But that said, it's really important that a lot of people can run it, because in the beginning we want people to be part of this movement. And I could just say, like, even if we did 300 million gas per 12 seconds, like, it's just not that hard.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you all should try it. We're going to put it out there. It's not that bad. I do it on my computer. We do it on cloud stuff. Like, it's not going to be that bad. It's a very freeing experience to not get rid of, but to offload the security aspect to others. So
yeah, give me an idea, just for normies who are interested in using something, comparative prices to launch a smart contract on base layer Ethereum versus on Facet. What's the difference in price going to be in gas to do something like that?
So one thing just to say is that this is not Facet's final form, blah, blah, blah. Like, there's something called blobs. There's something called batching. This is technology that you need to use if you want to be as cheap as possible. And it's possible to do that in a decentralized way, even though no one does that except maybe Tyco. We wanted to start with something really simple and really equal that everyone can understand, but it's going to get a lot cheaper. But today it's about 10x cheaper, basically. Okay. So if you want to do anything better, you pay a fixed cost on Ethereum for any transaction. So the larger the transaction, the cheaper it is, because that fixed cost goes down. But it's about 10x cheaper. So if you want to do a swap, it's going to be $1 or 50 cents instead of $10 or even $20 in the case that things gotten crazy. So it's going to be very cheap. And this is also a big advantage. Like, if you're interested in Inscriptions are also super cheap, which was a big design goal for us to transfer them. But when you're using Inscriptions and you're using a marketplace, and that marketplace uses a smart contract to transact on the L1, that's going to be pricey. And so all of that's a lot cheaper on Facet. So yeah, we want everyone to save a lot of money. That's the point, here.
No, I mean, look, anybody who's been paying attention to the L2s, realize there's massive issues which completely get away from decentralization. The whole idea, I don't know what it was, Blast, right? There was some heist or exploit, $40 million, or I don't know how many millions of dollars, kind of stolen, and but Pac-Man controls the exit ramp, right? And worked out a deal to basically refund everybody their money or whatever, and it's like, you realize what that is, right? And so I think something like, always this idea is very attractive, obviously. But getting traction is always the hardest part, right? How are you guys looking at right now? Okay, what are the kind of builders we want to attract? What's kind of the first use cases? What are we trying to build out first, right? To kind of maybe lay that foundation for developers. How are you guys kind of framing and looking at that?
Yeah, I mean, the goal of this system was to copy as much as possible and only change the things that are unique to us. And because of that, what we are hoping to attract are people who are very invested in the current system, people who don't want to throw out rollups. And we agree they shouldn't be thrown out, but people want to invest some time and maybe try and play with something that could be a real alternative. People who, people who are tired of the current situation, tired of leadership telling us it's great, Vitalik telling us it's great, and then also tired of the haters not having any real suggestions. Basically, these are the people we are trying to reach, and we want to bring everyone together. And especially, we're interested in hearing from people who are more knowledgeable than we are when it comes to optimism and roll-up systems. So that's the main additional add when it comes to what we're trying to do with V2. But fundamentally, the foundation of what we do, is the community who's been since the beginning, the Inscriptions community, ETH token community, just people who, believed in us before we actually even had a product that was capable of attracting a normal person. Believed in us when we were really nothing. So that's the foundation, and we want to build on that and bring in a lot more people.
I think the other thing to notice about this as well, which hasn't been done before, is is the positioning of this as essentially what is a public good, right, for Ethereum, an L1 plus that allows for scale on Ethereum without contracts, without without security councils, without privileged keys. Like once this is on mainnet, it can't be shut off.
Yep.
As long as you can send an Ethereum transaction, you can send a Facet transaction. And as long as somewhere in the world is running a Facet node, state can be computed. And even if no one in the world is running a Facet node for 10 years, and then someone runs a Facet node 10 years from now and indexes Ethereum, state will be computed. So once this is live, it like the toothpaste can't be put back in the tube, right? Like
Yep.
this is a scaling solution for Ethereum that anyone can run.
That's I mean, we saw it last cycle when Doge Party got spun back up, right? And it hadn't been running 4 years or whatever. And everybody's assets were still there, everything was still there. So very interesting. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I think that another like huge thing that is like a big selling point for Facet is whenever it comes to building like huge economies on top of something. Like right now, if I was wanting to build a big economy on top of Ethereum, I would struggle to find a home, because if I pick an L2 to build my huge economy on top of, like, if I'm like a huge corporation or I have like this big product or whatever it is, a lot of users, a lot of transactions that I'm expecting, I'm going to be at basically the mercy of some council, some corporation. And if I go with Ethereum, then obviously everything's going to be more expensive, and it's going to be hard to compete with other people that are running on these other options. So I think that Facet offers this unique place for people to build large economies on top of it without having to basically be at the mercy of another corporation, a U.S. government. Like, I mean, all these,
Or build your
all
own.
these.
I mean, if you look at Base itself, right? Like, I'm sure Base, Coinbase, they're smart people. Again, I like Coinbase like Base. I'm sure they considered a couple of options. One option might have been build our economy on the L1. Another option might have been build on another person's L2. And surprise, surprise, they decided to build their own L2 where no one could mess with them and they were in charge. And this, I think, is really, like, we talk about fragmentation and atomic composability and blah, blah, blah. Like, why is there so much fragmentation? Like, anyway, I don't have all the answers, but like, I think it's because of the centralization issue. If you can't find anywhere to use it without being a peon, you're going to build your own kingdom. That's what everyone's going to do.
Yeah. That's what I was getting at, is basically like, you see these corporations and their only option is to, well, if I don't want to be at the mercy of someone and I want cheap transactions, then I need to just launch my own L2. And we think that that's like bad, basically. For all these economies to have their own L2s instead of basically having all these economies sit on top of something that is its own world that has a shared economy that isn't governed by anyone, just like Ethereum was.
No, I mean, the value prop makes a lot of sense to me because, well, just talking about corporations, for example, yes, there are corporations, Sony and Base, and, large ones which can afford, the time and resources and technical, debt that's needed to spin up an L2 and run it and stuff. And they'll get the value accrual, which they're obviously interested in. But then there are 100x, 1000x more who just want the immutability and the inexpensive transactions and want to build on base layer Ethereum, basically, but don't want to spend all that additional resources and stuff. But I think you guys are in a really, really cool spot. Got your hand up. Inu, what's up, man?
Hello.
How's it going, dude?
Yeah, long time no talk. So I just wanted to ask, because I'm not really updated with Facet. How do you guys handle state conflicts in terms of, let's say, state conflicts? Or like, do you guys have any validation of state on chain yet, or like, is it, or are you kind of taking the Ordinals approach where like, if the what's called chain of like events
Like the
don't,
index or whatever says this. Yeah, which is right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
like if you're
So
trying for transfer, you know, like sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, I think this is a great question. And this was like one of the biggest misconceptions that at least we had when we were looking at how optimism works. We were like, oh my goodness, we do it the exact same way optimism does it. Optimism state is whatever an optimism full node says. The process by which optimism posts state roots to the L1 has absolutely no relationship to what is the correct state. If an incorrect state root is posted and there no fraud proof is done to stop it, that doesn't change the state of optimism. Optimism is entirely determined by L1 data and what a full node says, and we are exactly the same way. Now, we don't have bridges built into our system, but like with optimism, anyone can post state roots for Facet. Anyone can post those, and if those state roots are wrong, then bridges will function incorrectly, and that's the exact same thing that will happen on optimism. This is a huge thing where, at least me, when I came to this, I thought, well, optimism is posting proofs, and proofs are involved, so that must validate something about like the state of this. But the state is just what a full node says in all of these roll-up systems, including Facet.
Well, and in terms like, so what's then the main like difference between someone who wants to use optimism and someone who wants to use Facet?
Wait,
Like,
are we going with Facet or Facet?
I'm down with Facet.
Andrew
However
likes
you
the
wanna
French
say it.
version. He's like French
If
Canadian.
you're saying anything with an F, that's good. The main difference, so bridges are not really a difference, right? The main difference when it comes to bridges is anyone can use them. And so you will have the choice of people, and you want to pick the person you trust the most. You don't have to pick the owner of the rollup. So on Facet, there might be a bridge for whatever token that's run by Circle, and a bridge for whatever token that's run by the Tether company or whatever. And maybe if they run dollars and they also run ETH, or there are all these bridge possibilities. Now, the key difference is the native token, right? And this is a downside to Facet if you don't like this, because it's a key difference, is that there's no bridge for the native token because bridges are inherently have this centralization property. And so we don't want the native token to be centralized, even though any other token can be, because there's no choice about the native token. And so the way our native token is distributed, is issued, is a mechanism that is basically a proof of burn mechanism, where when you burn Ether doing L1 transactions that result in Facet transactions, that burned Ether will be credited to you on Facet in the form of our native token, the Facet Compute token. But aside from that, and this was our goal, it's exactly the same, except you get more choice.
That makes sense.
Very cool. And
Yep.
one last question. Since like I haven't been following Facet for a while, do you still like mainly interact it through mainnet layer 1, or is like, or do you use like a layer 2 Facet chain or something now?
I can
Right.
answer that. Like, so
I was real quick. I was going to say you're right about this. So this is also a difference and a downside, right? Depending on how you look at it, which is the initial version of Facet V2. Every user submits their own transactions one by one. So if you think about Optimism again, Optimism has this mechanism called forced inclusion, which is really a thing called deposit transactions. And version 1 of Facet, and we changed a bunch of things here because those are centralized in Optimism, but version 1 of Facet is basically like Optimism if you had to do forced inclusion for every transaction, but there was no delay and a bunch of other things were improved and changed. Version next is going to be one that uses batching and more traditional kind of base sequencing approaches. So the initial version will have that limitation, but it was something we wanted to do so it's just maximally clear and anyone can understand exactly how it works, and the most democratic as well. But yes, that's going to change, but that's a difference now. We're focused on users submit transactions to the L1.
But I think what's important here to clarify it is like the DApp, it will will abstract the complexity of Facet and present you with Ethereum transactions to sign. So a dApp, a Facet dApp, will feel for a regular Ethereum normie like an Ethereum app. They won't be connecting to a different network. They will be interacting with a web page, for example, or an app that presents them with a transaction to sign with their Ethereum wallet on the Ethereum network, and they will sign that transaction, which will be a lot cheaper for the type of op codes that it's doing. It'll be a lot cheaper than it would have been if it were actually interacting with a L1 smart contract, because it's not. Like, effectively, when you're signing that transaction, you're sending an EOA to EOA transaction, because it's not, remember, the to address is the Facet inbox address, which is a burn address, all zeros, space 7. So it's not a contract. It is a EOA that doesn't exist yet, and no one has keys to it. And you're sending that transaction that has those Facet op codes, if you will, as a payload inside of the L1 call data, right? Inside one transaction. So you're spending 50 cents, 80 cents, whatever, to deploy a contract. You're spending 50, 80 cents to create a swap pair, which, by the way, on an L1 would cost $100,
Sure.
Right? So yes, it's 10x cheaper, but on some scenarios, it can be 99x cheaper. It depends on how much complexity is baked into those op codes that are part of the call data of the L1 transaction.
Yeah, and let's be clear. I think, because I've heard it maybe pop up a couple times, this is not there's no chain connected with Facet, correct? There's no blockchain.
No, I mean it is a chain. It's basically a chain in the same way that like Optimism is a chain, in the same way that Base is a chain. It's just that the chain is derived from L1 transactions,
Right.
but actually that is also the same with Optimism and Base. The difference is, how are those L1 transactions created? With Optimism and Base, it's batched by one address only. They're in charge of the batcher. They post those blobs. With Facet, anyone can post these transactions to the L1. It's very much just like Optimism, except anyone can post the transactions that cause the state on the L2 to be derived by them, and then obviously the bridge is different, but that's a separate thing. So in regards to state derivation and it being a chain, it's very much similar to Optimism. I mean, it's actually just like Optimism. Whenever we built the Geeth, we actually forked OP Geeth. Like, Facet V2 is going to be literally running a forked version of OP Geeth. So, I mean, yeah, it's a chain in the same sense that like Optimism or Base is.
Go ahead, Inu.
Can I ask, how are the state roots are being published right now, and like who can publish it?
Yeah, so basically, like Tom was saying earlier, state roots being published for Optimism and Base are used for the bridges. Whenever you are running a node, an Optimism node or a Base node, whatever state roots are posted does not affect the state that is derived from the batched transactions that were posted to L1. So with Optimism, they need that. They have this enshrined bridge that is used for their gas token. We don't have that. So we don't need like a protocol level state root posting thing. But we actually already built and have a basically fully functioning what we're calling an optimistic bridge. So instead of an optimistic like roll up or L2, you can run optimistic bridges on Facet. And basically that's forking Optimism and pointing it at a Facet Geeth instance and running the proposer. And then, you have to deploy all the contracts, right? But then when you do that, you can basically you can run an optimistic bridge, which on top of Facet, which does the exact same thing that Optimism does, but it's on a decentralized protocol, and it's not for like a gas token. It would be used for any token that you want, but it's not. The core difference here is that it does not affect the protocol at a core level. So if you stop posting it, it doesn't affect Facet, the core. If someone stopped supporting wrapped Bitcoin, or if Circle stopped supporting USDC, it's not like it would have major effects on Ethereum, but it's not like it would bring Ethereum down. It would not halt the economy of Ethereum. Whereas if that is running the gas token, that is, the token that is being used for every single transaction. And so that would have major halting problems on the L2. So that's how we like to separate it out.
I think that's right. And I think another way to think about it is just, even today, you could set up Optimism software, get the state roots from Optimism, and post them to your own private contract on the L1, and nothing could stop you from doing that. And we are just mirroring that exact workflow. And we are adding a little bit of something on top of it, which is that we are copying Optimism again as much as possible. There is one contract in Optimism called the L2 to L1 message passer that basically stores every single message, bridge out whatever you're trying to do from the L2 to the L1. And this is actually a decentralized contract because no one controls it. And so what we did is added that as a pre-deploy. And the intention is to have everyone who's doing any bridge go through this decentralized contract. So everyone posting state roots will be posting it of that contract, and therefore will be securing every single bridge by anyone on the network. And so you'll be able to say, okay, well, here are 50 people posting state roots. That's a pretty good test for, like, are all 50 of them wrong or something like this. So we want to, make it more coordinated in a decentralized way as well.
Wait, so I'm trying to understand this, but so are the state roots kind of more like checkpoints where you're just kind of like putting the state on chain so that kind of indexing and stuff for people, it's kind of like a block height kind of thing? Or is the state root like, if anyone can submit it, what's preventing me from submitting like an invalid proof or something?
Because it doesn't affect indexing at all. That's the big thing that Tom was talking about earlier. It's like when we thought about L2s and we thought about state roots being posted, we thought when state roots get posted, they are controlling or have an effect on the state of the L2 in the nodes. And that is actually not true at all. They are there for the bridging only. And so basically, if you were to start posting your own state roots, you would have to do it to your own contract, first of all. And if you did that and you had a bridge, then that's fine. You are permissioned. You permission yourself to post these state roots to this contract that is used for validating bridging in and out of Facet. So that is the only reason that you would want to post state roots. And anyone operating bridges, so bridge operators can run the software that we're going to open source to run an optimistic bridge on Facet. And when doing that, they can post their own state roots because obviously they're going to trust themselves most. And by doing that, they're securing their own bridge the exact same way that Optimism does.
Yeah, I think another way to look at it is if a state root is wrong and a bridge depends on that state root being right, then that bridge is compromised and maybe gets drained. And that is true of any bridge that exists on Facet, and that's true of any bridge that exists on Optimism. And so Optimism correctly invents things like fraud proofs to prevent that from happening. And those same things can be used in the exact same way on Facet to prevent it from happening on Facet as well.
Awesome. So if anybody wants to come up, more than welcome to come on up, ask questions. I know OXB1 joined us. Do you have any comments or questions, man? Nope. OXB1, or who else was up here? Chris, I think, right? Yeah, Chris, what's up, man? We got mutes. Anyway, Inu's got more questions. Inu's like trying to figure this whole thing out. What's up, man?
No, it's okay. Like someone else can speak as well.
No, it's just,
And shout out, by the way, thank you, Inu, for these questions. Like, just got to say, very, very good stuff. Really enjoying it.
no, this is
Yeah, no, this is pretty cool. It's kind of like a new paradigm of like, kind of like, I mean, you gotta fucking give some kudos. Like, you guys have been building for a very long time, just going through like the loops and hoops, starting from, you know, inscriptions and whatnot till now. It's very impressive.
Well, thank you.
So, sorry, but so when you're submitting the state route, right? Like one of the concerns is like, okay, sure, like you can bridge it, but what if like, if for example, I'm like a bridge operator, or I created this bridge for whatever token that I want to create, what's stopping me from like kind of not bridging it over, but just like minting an unlimited supply on Facet?
That's a great question. And that is how these bridges work. There's an L1 contract, an L2 contract, and the L2 contract says, if the L1 contract is telling me to mint, I will mint. And so the L1 contract better be programmed in a good way. Otherwise, it's game over. And so what we are doing, and we've made our own bridges and whatever in the past, and we have them running on Fast, and we like them. But what we're doing now is we are, the L1 side, we are copying Optimism again, exactly, basically. And they have, you know, a great thing called the standard bridge abstract contract that has something called like initiate ERC20 deposit. And it checks to make sure that you escrow it correctly in the L1 bridge, L1 contract, and then it emits the correct event or call in our case that will do it. So you have to trust the bridge operator. And you know, the big difference with Facet is just, if you don't trust the bridge operator, then people using that bridge lose all their money, which is very bad. But when it comes to the other L2s that have the native token bridge, if you don't trust the bridge operator, the native token is dead. Sorry, we keep repeating the same thing. But the native token being dead is really game over for the protocol. So yeah, you have to L1 smart contract that only tells the L2 to mint something if that equivalent token on the L1 is escrowed.
so where are you guys as far as releasing the L2? Has it already been released, or where are you in the process?
So we got some stuff on testnet. If you look at my testnet activity, yeah, it's out. So you can look at our doc. It's funny because we put out something, a testnet and some docs, and it's changed a lot since then. So the hesitancy is always like, is this going to confuse people or not? But we are very, very close. There are a bunch of different components to the system, and the bridges aren't part of the protocol, but we are going to launch those just to start because people won't understand, I think, the protocol unless they have those. So we're in an audit right now, basically, is the answer. And once that is over, we are going to release it ASAP. We hope to have a nice community-driven bug bounty type thing where we put something out there for that. But for us, the only hard requirement is professional audit, and just got to get it out as soon as possible, basically. Like, it's been ruining our lives.
Awesome. Well, we'll have to have you back on when that happens. Chris, do you have any follow-up questions?
That's it, man. Did you guys? You guys were. It was just you and Michael for a while. Did Jeremy join the team recently, or has he been there?
Yes. Jeremy is the amazing, I guess we can now really say, employee number one. You know, Facet's a company. I don't know how we're going to make money since we don't control the L2. We'll figure it out. But Jeremy is it's a team of three now. So yeah, it's super, super exciting. It's been great to work with these guys, and I hope they would say the same about me, even if I were not on the call. But yes, it's amazing, and welcome aboard, Jeremy.
Yeah, welcome. Definitely. I mean, we've been covering and kind of following your guys' journey for a while, and it's always impressive how much you and just Michael were shipping. We were always kind of blindsided, like, these guys are cracked. They never stop. So welcome, Jeremy. You're definitely up to par with them. So
Well,
It's great to see you guys hustling.
Jeremy's got his work cut out for him.
Yeah. So
Trying to explain this to the normies is it's fucking challenging, bro.
yeah,
So,
it's insanely impressive what you guys have built as two. So excited to see what you guys do with the third.
Yeah, I mean, I've been with the team for the last 4 or 5 months, kind of on contract and working closely with Michael and Tom. It's been a blast. So it's really exciting to kind of getting close to this mainnet launch and really putting it out there. A lot of work ahead, as we've discussed here, but the pieces are really coming together, and it's really exciting to see kind of a new lens on how to use an L1 at scale, and that's what I'm excited about pushing out there.
I love it. Inu, go ahead, man.
I don't know if someone asked this yet, but do you need to bridge ETH, like like ETH, just like ETH gas main
No,
layer one gas?
that is a great question, and this is the most important thing about Facet for everyone to understand. No bridging is required. Period. There's no bridging required. You can go and use Facet immediately, and you can get the native token purely passively without ever thinking about it by just creating ETH transactions. So no bridging is required unless you want to, spend ETH on something. But if you want to deploy a contract, create a cool thing, a game, whatever you want to do, 0 steps necessary. And that's a big UX improvement. There are some confusing things, but no bridging unless you want to.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong. I can sort of summarize it in like one small statement of like the main difference is that Facet is kind of like a pseudo layer 2 that you can interact with it using ETH mainnet without bridging. But if you want to bridge like ERC20 tokens and whatnot, you can bridge it. You'd have to bridge those. So it's kind of like in this shadowy area of like, it's technically on ETH mainnet, like you can actually interact with it. Just that if you bridge it, like if you just want other tokens that's not ETH, you have to do that.
Yes, that's a good way to look at it. I would say it is an L2. It's not a pseudo L2. It's also a roll up. We try to avoid these things. We used to say we're not a roll up, we're not an L2, but we are. We're an L2, we're a roll up. If you want to get into like, super nerd roll up theory, we are a based sovereign roll up. But yes, what you said is accurate. And the only funny twist, back to Optimism again, Optimism actually has a mechanism through their forced inclusion thing where you don't have to bridge either. So we actually came up with it independently, but whatever. The point being, Optimism actually is so smart they even came up with this, but just don't use it. So if you want to do forced inclusion and are willing to wait 24 hours for a transaction to go through, you can burn ETH on the L1 and pay for your Optimism transaction that way without bridging. So Optimism, shout out to Optimism. We're just trying to, stand on your shoulders, but it's the native thing for us.
And I also want to add, like, the lack of a enshrined or, i.e., in protocol bridge is a feature, not a bug, because it's those enshrined protocol bridges and contracts that themselves are the security risk and the centralization and the upgradability. Like all of that is literally because of these privileged keys and security councils that manage such an important central part of the protocol that every other L2 does today, right? This is the only scaling solution for the L1 itself that has 0 privileged keys, 0 ability for us to upgrade the protocol unilaterally. The only way, and this is very important, like the only way that Facet can evolve or change in the future is through social consensus and a hard fork. And why does that sound familiar? Because that's the only way that Ethereum moves forward as well, right? The only way Ethereum moves forward is through EIPs, social consensus, hard fork. And that's exactly, that's the only way to build a L1 scaling solution that is as decentralized as the underlying protocol Ethereum.
And so this is very interesting because like Facet is going to have like multiple, like each chain, for example, like Base or Optimism or whatever has like technically one bridge, but like Facet's going to have like basically infinite bridges for n equals amount of tokens that you want to bridge to it. So
may the best bridge, may the best bridge win. Just like on Ethereum. Ethereum doesn't have an enshrined tether bridge, right? It doesn't have an enshrined USDC bridge. Like Vitalik is not telling the world which bridge to use.
Sure. Yeah. Now, when like, how do you handle like when you create a bridge? Let's say you create a bridge, like to prevent like people from spamming, just like a million bridges. How does like the indexer handle when someone creates like a bridge for a token? Like, do you guys like add it to the indexer as like an ad, like a static address or something, or what do you do?
It's really the responsibility, just like on Ethereum, it's the responsibility of apps, of dApps, of the DEXs out there. Like if on Ethereum I create an ERC20 and say this is a stable coin for USD, it's backed 1-to-1. This is amazing. Let me go try to swap for ETH with it. Then I'm going to go see and say, wait, there's no pair on Uniswap, and I make the pair, and now there's no liquidity in there. I have to get other people to put liquidity in. So it's really the social element that determines the value of any token. And this includes non-bridge tokens too. Someone could create a Facet native token that did something or not, or whatever they want to do. And does that token have any value? Like, social consensus. So I think when, we're going to run a DEX probably, and we're going to do stuff. So obviously if we're running a DEX, which is going to be centralized, like all, websites, Uniswap, right, is a centralized website. It'll tell you this token's probably a scam or whatever. Like, we are going to make sure our users don't get scammed on the website. And I think other will do that. But on the grand level of the blockchain, yeah, it's purely social consensus based, which tokens have value.
Very, very cool. Thank you.
Jeff just came up on stage. You got anything, brother?
All good. Just it was great listening in. I'm in Token 2049 Singapore. Just wanted to shout out everybody. Say hey. Hope all is well.
It looked like a lot of fun out there. I saw the women boxing yesterday. That was good stuff, man. Wish I could have gone out, but I just can't travel anymore. I'm done. Anyway, Tom, you guys, I appreciate you guys coming on. Where should people go to just follow your account, or what's the best way to get hooked up, start working on it on testnet?
What do you think, Jeremy? What's the best thing?
First of all, like facet.org, amazing domain. Facet.org, FACET. Check that out as a starting point. There's links to our alpha docs where you can read more about the underlying code and whatnot there. Get information about the current kind of Sepolia links and whatnot. Obviously, we have a Discord link there as well. We have the Twitter account as well. So follow us there, and reach out to me directly. Like, if you're a developer and the idea of copy pasting contracts into a new environment with little to no changes, and building a dApp on what we think will be the most decentralized way to scale Ethereum going forward, like, hit me up. Let me help. Let me find out. Let me find out ways to help you and help you get connected so that your dApp is available at launch when mainnet goes live. There's, we're like Tom mentioned, we're in audit at the moment. That audit is going to take a few more weeks. It's a professional audit by a major firm, and when that's done, we're looking at mainnet. And nice. You can get started today on exploring the protocol and figuring out how to copy paste your contracts into it and get them going. I'm not a dev, and just for context, I was able to chat GPT up a basic ERC20 contract and deploy it on Facet about a month ago as a test, and it was pretty intuitive, right? Like, for a non-dev using GPT. So like, that should show you how EVM equivalent this is, and how if you know what you're doing on EVM, you'll be able to deploy here. So hit me up, let me help. Let's figure out a way to kind of get dApps in there from day one.
I love it. Thanks you guys. And we're gonna have to pull it here because we got to Chris and I got to run to another meeting. But always appreciate you guys coming on. Definitely hit us up when you go live on mainnet. We'll have you guys back on and kind of celebrate that event. Ethereum L1 Plus sounds really, really good to me, and always happy to support you guys. So anyway, we'll see you guys on Tuesday for our next show, and have a great weekend, everybody.
Hell yeah. Thank you all so much.
Guys.